These aren't just knockouts, they're execution-level finishes that silenced crowds, shattered hype trains, and left even the toughest warriors staring at the lights.
The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo.
This is the dark side of MMA's deadliest endings. It was UFC 142, January 2012, and Edson Barboza was in the kind of rhythm that only killers find inside the octagon. Terry Edom kept pressing, trying to find openings, and then, in a flash of violence, Barboza spun, his heel slicing through the air like a blade.
Barboza landed that kick on Anthony Ngannou, but he caught him with
The wheel kick landed flush on Edom's jaw, freezing him instantly. He collapsed, stiff as a statue, as the crowd exploded in disbelief.
To take a chance and risk getting knocked out!
The UFC had seen knockouts before, but never like this. Barboza's spinning wheel kick wasn't just a finish, it was a moment that redefined what was possible inside the cage. But just 2 years earlier, a different kind of creativity had shaken the sport. December 2010, WEC 53, Anthony Showtime Pettis faced Benson Henderson for the lightweight title. 5 grueling rounds, and still no clear winner. Then, out of nowhere, Pettis ran up the cage wall, launched himself like a missile, and smashed Henderson in the face with the infamous Showtime kick. Henderson crumbled, the arena erupted, and MMA had its first viral highlight, a strike so outrageous it looked like it came from a movie, but was all too real. And sometimes, it's not style but brutality that shocks the world. UFC 70, 2007, Gabriel Gonzaga stepped into the cage with Mirko Cro Cop Filipovic, the most feared kicker on the planet. But fate twisted that night. Gonzaga launched his own head kick, and Cro Cop folded grotesquely, his leg twisting beneath him as his body crumpled to the canvas.
Mirko looks tentative though.
The MMA world was stunned the hunter had become the hunted, the head kick king dethroned by his own weapon. Fast forward to UFC Denver 2018. Yair Rodriguez versus Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie. For 5 rounds, Zombie pressed forward, eating shots and giving them back until the very last second of the fight. Literally. 1 second on the clock and Yair ducked under, whipping an upward elbow from an impossible angle. It landed, Zombie fell face first, unconscious, as time expired.
One more flurry.
It was one of the rarest, most shocking walk-off knockouts in MMA history, a finish no one saw coming until it happened. But sometimes the chaos isn't about precision or creativity. Sometimes it's just raw violence. UFC 34, 2001, Matt Hughes versus Carlos Newton. Newton locked in a guillotine, Hughes lifted him high above the cage, and in a desperate slam, both men crashed to the canvas. For a split second, Hughes was out cold, but Newton was out colder. The ref raised Hughes' hand, and the legend of his welterweight reign began in the most chaotic, jaw-dropping finish imaginable.
Carlos Newton Juarez on Wilson.
MMA deadliest style knockouts didn't end there. Meet Conor McGregor. He needed only 13 seconds to change the sport forever. UFC 194. 2015, Jose Aldo had ruled the featherweight division for nearly a decade, undefeated for 10 years, feared by all. But when the bell rang, McGregor's left hand found its mark before Aldo even had time to settle. One perfect counter, Aldo collapsed face first, and in less time than it takes to tie a glove, the crown had a new king.
Smiling.
It wasn't just a knockout, it was a seismic shift in MMA, a single punch that rewrote history. And then came the fastest finish in UFC history, a knockout so violent it felt like a glitch in reality. UFC 239 2019, Jorge Masvidal sprinted across the cage, launched himself airborne, and drove his knee into Ben Askren's skull in just 5 seconds. Askren's body went stiff before he even hit the canvas.
Clock is brought to you by Modelo.
The fight was over before commentary could even finish their opening sentence. It wasn't just a knockout, it was a demolition, one that still lives in highlight reels as the very definition of brutality. Francis Ngannou, though, operates on a different level of violence. UFC 218 2017, he faced Alistair Overeem, a decorated striker, a legend of the sport. But none of that mattered. Ngannou unleashed an uppercut from hell, a punch so savage it looked like it could lift Overeem's soul out of his body. Overeem's head snapped back violently, his body collapsing in slow motion, and the MMA world knew they were witnessing a monster in the making.
Maynard's phone to try to get a matchup with Ngannou.
Ngannou's power was no longer hype, it was real, terrifying, and unforgettable. And finally, one of the greatest comebacks ever seen. UFC 278 2022 Leon Edwards vs Kamaru Usman. 4 rounds down, Edwards was losing badly, his dreams of gold slipping away. Then, in the final minute of the 5th round, he disguised a jab, shifted his stance, and unleashed a head kick that landed flush on Usman's jaw. The champion fell unconscious, the arena roared, and Edwards screamed. It was destiny fulfilled in the most dramatic way possible, a finish that will echo through MMA history forever. But in UFC 100 2009, one of the most iconic knockouts in MMA history, Dan Henderson vs Michael Bisping. For 2 rounds, Bisping circled into danger, and Henderson was patiently stalking, waiting for the opening. Then came the H-bomb. Henderson's right hand detonated on Bisping's chin with nuclear force, sending him crashing lifelessly to the canvas. And if that wasn't enough, Henderson dove in with a flying forearm, cementing the finish as one of the most brutal and unforgettable moments the UFC has ever seen. But the beauty of MMA is that history comes full circle. UFC 199 2016, Michael Bisping got his redemption, and he did it in the most shocking way possible. A late replacement against Luke Rockhold, the champion who had humiliated him once before. Bisping walked into the cage with nothing to lose. And then, out of nowhere, his left hook found Rockhold's jaw. The champion dropped, the referee rushed in, and the impossible had become reality. Michael Bisping, the ultimate underdog, was suddenly UFC middleweight champion of the world. Upsets have always defined this sport, but none shook the world quite like UFC 69 inches 2007. Georges St. Pierre, the welterweight king, was on top of the world until Matt Serra landed the fight of his life. A looping right hand sent GSP reeling, and Serra swarmed with relentless strikes until the referee had no choice but to stop it.
Good Lord! He's hurt him 3 times in the last 60 seconds.
The crowd was stunned, the MMA world in disbelief. The greatest fighter of all time had been humbled by a massive underdog in one of the biggest shocks in UFC history. And if upsets change careers, demolitions change legacies. UFC 121 2010 Brock Lesnar, the WWE megastar turned UFC heavyweight champion, was expected to crush Cain Velasquez. Instead, Velasquez tore through him with relentless combinations and takedowns, battering Lesnar until the giant crumbled. The referee stepped in, and Cain Velasquez had not only claimed the heavyweight crown, he had dismantled the unstoppable beast in front of a roaring arena. But perhaps the most mythical moment came outside the UFC. Strikeforce 2010, Fedor Emelianenko, the last emperor, unbeaten for a decade, the man believed to be invincible, stepped into the cage with Fabricio Werdum. In just over a minute, the unthinkable happened. Werdum lured Fedor into his guard, locked up a triangle armbar, and forced the great champion to tap. The arena gasped. The aura of invincibility shattered. It was the night a legend bled, proving even gods can fall. And that's the thing about MMA, it's never just a sport, it's a theater of chaos, where one strike, one mistake, or one perfectly timed move can flip history on its head. So, if you thought this list was the peak of MMA's deadliest moments, wait until you see what's next, because the fight world never stops shocking us.